Alright, everybody. Welcome back to I Bought a Microphone. I was a little hesitant. I didn't know what I was going to talk about this week, and then it came to me. I mean, you're all coming to me for seemingly no reason at all. None that I can understand, anyway. But here you are. And I thought that today I would talk about things that I like, that you may or may not like. Things you may not know about, I don't know. Maybe you know about them, maybe you don't. I don't know. I'm just saying, these are things that I like. And I'll try, again, not to bang on the table. I'm working on it. I think I might have to handcuff my hands behind my back to make that work, but we'll see how this goes. Though first, I would like to make a small addendum to my last episode. There was something I failed to mention, which I feel maybe somebody else out there noticed. I recently watched Spider-Man Homecoming again, which I actually enjoy. Of the last 4 Spider-Man movies that have been made, it is the best. It's pretty good. It's not, perfect, but it's pretty good. And, well, let me say, one of the things that irritates me about the movie, which, if you listen to my last episode, you know where I'm going, Flash Thompson was, in the comic books, a very tall, muscular, football-playing blonde man. And in this movie is a small, aspiring mathlete? What do they call it? An academic decathlon. Like, he's an aspiring one of those guys. And I'm going to piss somebody off. He appears to be Indian or Pakistani or, of the Indian subcontinent region somewhere in there. And again, it's not about race. A, he's supposed to be blonde. And B, Flash Thompson would not be caught anywhere near a fucking, school educational decathlon. It's not where Flash Thompson belongs. He is a fucking football player. He's the jock. He's the quintessential anti-Peter Parker character. He is exactly the opposite of Peter Parker in every way. And, I don't know, just having some dick calling Spider-Man Penis Parker doesn't work the same way for me. It misses a couple of the beats, I think. But, of course, Flash Thompson is on a whole different journey now. He's Venom, and he's traveled into space and whatever. But I'm just saying, for that, if we're going... But obviously that movie wasn't going back to the well, so let's not worry about that, I guess. Still, though, yet another blonde male character, something I realized after the show, that they were pretty much all male characters that were blonde that were recast to non-blonde characters. But the females were still allowed to keep their, blonde hair. But anyway, let's move on. Moving on to the topic of the evening, or the day, whenever you happen to be listening to this. One thing I have noticed, and I try to edit them out, is the lip smacking. I don't know where it comes from, because I don't usually talk like that. But for some reason, as soon as I get in front of a microphone, I start smacking my lips. I don't know what that is. So I hope... See, there was one right there. I hope I edited most of them out, but you might still hear a couple of them here and there. Though I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a horrible thing. I mean, if it really bugs you, let me know in the comments. If it's not something that bothers everybody, then I might just stop worrying about it. It's a self-conscious thing for me, I guess. So things that I like. The reason I actually, again, like I said earlier, I was kind of struggling on what I was going to talk about tonight, and I have been listening to Harmontown recently, and that kind of got me... That's partially where what you're listening to started, but it's also what got me to where I am tonight, so thank Dan Harmon again for that. I had watched the movie Harmontown, released in 2014, a couple of years ago, honestly, and I hadn't really followed up on it at all, just kind of let it go. Wasn't really sure about podcasts at the time, though I have since turned around on that. They have some definite fucking serious cultural and just, entertainment value. And I had gotten into podcasts because of my brother, Tim. Shout out. And, name drop. And, I know that dude. Anyway, yeah, he had gotten me into a couple of things, mainly, How Did This Get Made, which is one of the things that I like. If you haven't listened to How Did This Get Made and you enjoy watching terrible movies, God, I can't even, off the top of my head, something that, a bad movie that everyone might have watched. Fuck. Doom Generation. I don't know. Let's start there. Not necessarily a great movie, but hilarious. Fun to watch. Now that one's kind of disturbing. Anyone who like Sharknado, let's go there. That's a great place to start. I mean, that's a movie that's made bad for the sake of being bad. But there are movies that... Oh, The Room. Okay, The Room is a perfect example, which is also on the list of things that I like. The Room is, I mean, spectacularly bad. Like, in a way that is hard to describe. Like, in a way that something that somebody makes in earnest and is to be seen as that, as earnest, and is, in fact, almost every shot of it, every scene, just horrible. And, poorly directed, and you take every cut, like, seemingly every worst shot, every seemingly worst performance that you can get, or maybe that's just what you were getting out of your actors, and you put them into this movie, and it makes something incredible. See, that's the thing. If it wasn't earnest... Like, if they had set out to make a bad movie, I don't know that it would have succeeded the same way that The Room has. Like, Birdemic, another thing that I'm a big fan of. Just, like, if you make a $27,000 terrible movie with the intent to make a terrible movie, people are like, well, yeah, obviously that's terrible. Go fuck yourself. But if you spend $27,000 and make a terrible movie that is in itself a work of comedic art, and just in a way that you could never have intended, I mean, I don't know how you deal with that. Obviously, Tommy Wiseau has kind of embraced that part of The Room. And if you haven't seen The Room, get on that shit. Like, literally. But don't sit in a room. A room. That's where you're safe. It's the space where we all can be ourselves. The Room. No, I'm sorry. That's my Tommy Wiseau impression. Don't sit alone in a room and watch The Room. Get a friend or two, get together and say, we're going to watch this incredible, I say that without irony, incredible movie. It's without credit. It's incredible. Yes. No. I... Twisting the meaning of words. That's fine. Yeah, this one's probably going to be a little later than the other ones just because I want to get better at editing. And I'm not... The last one had a couple of words cut out and shit, like, kind of irritated me. I tried to... My program was supposed to eliminate silence, but it also eliminated some of the words that I said quietly for some reason. I don't know what that was all about. So, I'm going to spend more time editing this one than I did the last one. So this one will be probably a day or two later. I just want to make it better. I'm all trying to refine my technique. Alright, so we talked about Harmontown. Well, actually, we didn't talk about Harmontown. I mentioned Harmontown and then branched out into a whole other thing. How did this get made? Which is, again, one of my favorite things. This is the shit that me and my friends used to do. Just fucking see terrible movies. Like, back in the day, it wasn't solicited. Nobody would tell you, watch this movie. You would just watch a movie, and it would be terrible. And you and your friends would say, God, what a horrible movie that was. And we would break down all the funny things about it. And some of the movies were so bad that we would watch them again. Like, this is not necessarily on everybody's list, but me and my buddy Colin are big fans of the Blair Witch Project 2, Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows. Fucking... It's an awful movie. Let me start off by that point. It's not... We don't watch it because it's fucking Shakespeare. That movie is amazing. Oh, and it was especially cool if you were a fan of the Blair Witch Project, which came out in 1999, which me and him were. Just, it's such a effective film. Just for how little they spent on it, and just, they had these unknown actors, and they were just trying something new, and they made something pretty amazing. And even to this day, I think you watch that movie with all the lights out and the sound turned up, it's still pretty effective. Like all those fucking creepy ass noises happening in the distance. What the fuck is that? She fucking wakes up, there's a package, and it's fucking Josh's tongue? Or is it Josh's tongue? Whose tongue is it? What is in that package? There's teeth in there? What the fuck is happening? I don't know. It's just, it works on a couple of different levels as far as I'm concerned. And the second movie takes what is a pretty sound and effective premise and just goes the exact opposite direction and just does every ridiculous thing you could possibly. So I'm hoping for a How Did This Get Made of the Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows at some point. I heard they're doing Free Jack soon, which that's one of my favorite bad movies, Free Jack. Oh yeah, I'm looking forward. All right, so going back, we're going not in a straight line. We're going in a, call it a Venn diagram. I don't know, whatever. So we briefly touched on Harmontown, which led us to How Did This Get Made, which led us to a couple of terrible movies that you might want to be interested in seeing. Shark Attack 2? Yes. Absolutely yes. Now, moving from that vein into things that I like because they're good, not because they're spectacularly terrible. Harmontown is one of the things that I quite enjoy. Now, for those of you who are diehard Harmonians, I have to say I'm coming in kind of late. I think I watched the movie, the documentary that he did back in 2015 or 16. That sounds about right. It was a couple of years ago. I didn't actually start listening to the podcast until late last year. And I have started from the beginning. So I haven't listened to anything recent. I don't think that makes it any less relevant as far as I'm concerned, because what he's talking about is truth. And truth is truth, whether it's, said 5 years ago or said yesterday. That doesn't change. And I can still appreciate it. And actually, listening to the episodes that he did for the movie, and then watching the movie again, it was that much better. So, and the movie gets to the heart of it a little bit, but only touches on it. What a Harmonian is. A nerd who wants love. And who has only love to give. Has no derision. Or I guess, I don't know. None of us are perfect. We all have bad moments. We all want to be someone who gives love and is worthy of love. And is accepted. I think that's all what we really want at the end of the day. We want who we are, whatever that happens to be accepted and, acknowledged and not necessarily worshipped or anything like that, but appreciated for its uniqueness. And that's, I think, what the central theme of Harmontown at least was. I haven't listened to it in the last couple of years, but I'm getting there. I'm working my way through it. Maybe that's not how you're supposed to do podcasts, but you can't fucking tell me how to do anything. Also, is there a right way to do any particular thing? I don't know. Maybe it's all just tricks and chicanery. I covered podcasts, How Did This Get Made, Harmontown. Those are two that I feel very strongly about. I talked about some bad movies, Blair Witch Project, and Blair Witch Project 2, Book of Shadows. First movie I like, unironically. I think it's really good. I don't really care for horror movies in the overall. So that would, somebody who's not necessarily a horror fan, I would recommend the Blair Witch Project. I watched the recent one, the Blair Witch Project. It's not really a remake, it's another sequel. It's just using the technology that we have now. So they have drones things, stuff that we didn't have, better night vision and all of that. But it's essentially the same movie. You don't get anything new, and I think actually that it's not filmed. It's filmed in the widescreen. It's not filmed in the 4:3 ratio, and it doesn't have. They actually have shots in the movie that are in film, like not on, the S video or whatever it was back then that she has. Like, there was actually shots in film. And I don't know that they did that this time. It felt all very digital to me. And it just doesn't track the same way. But again, it's the same movie made for a new generation, I guess. It's another way to describe it. So maybe somebody now seeing that movie will be affected the same way. Whereas somebody now watching the 1999 version would say, man, they don't have drones, they don't have fucking night vision, like, what are these fuckers doing? Like, why would you even go out there? This is ridiculous. This is like the Stone Age times. So maybe. Alright, I really didn't want this to be the Blair Witch Project podcast. Talking about things that I like, and the Blair Witch Project is one of them. I'm like I'm arguing with myself. That's one of my favorite things. Like, I'm preemptively countering any arguments that people are having about it, because that's the sort of thing that I do. Alright. So, from my last podcast, you might be familiar with my like of comics and comic-related things. I am a big old fan of that. I actually wasn't for many years. Like, I moved to California probably 93, 94-ish. And I kind of shed the whole comic book thing. I let it run to the side. And I've kept pace with it a little bit. Like, I read, like, Preacher and Transmetropolitan, things that were recommended to me by my brother. But I never really explored it myself until probably the last couple of years, last 3 years, I think I've really been seriously getting back into it. And there's, some interesting stuff going on out there. And I won't pretend to be an authority on anything. And again, I don't know again. And I haven't done research on any of this. This is all just stuff that has come to my attention that I really think is interesting. There is a series called The Runaways, which has recently had a revival. There's a new writer named Rainbow Rowell who has revived the series, and really, to me, she understands what was great about it. The original creator, Brian K. Vaughan, created something pretty fucking unique. Just moving and heartfelt. And I've read, I'm 36 now. Yeah, 36. Alright, but I'm no longer a young man, but I still remember parts of my youth. The good parts, the bad parts. And very few things have captured the essence, the feel of what it is to be a teenager like The Runaways. It's a completely fantastic tale about a couple of children who realize that their parents are supervillains and are trying to essentially destroy the world and decide to stop them, which in and of itself is amazing. Like, just think about learning. Just think about, just abusive parents. Like, put it on that simple of a metaphor. Parents who only want to inflict harm, not support, not to encourage, but, to denigrate and, destroy everything that their children try to do. Imagine what it's like to rise above that, to say, I'm not going to let you break me down. A lot of people don't get there. It's not easy. And I don't come from that background. My parents have always been very supportive, very understanding. Not that we got along every day of the week, but nobody ever insulted me or said that, decisions that I were making were, that I was an idiot, or no verbal or physical abuse, just, two positively charged ions colliding. That'll happen from time to time. But at the same time, as a teenager, from the window that you look at it, it's, everyone's against me. My parents don't understand. From the window of a 35-year-old, I see it as what it is, which is, they were doing the best they could and actually were surprisingly supportive of an incredibly weird teenager. And God bless them for that. So, The Runaways to me is a very, intense metaphor for that sort of thing. When you realize that your parents are not infallible, are in fact human, and are, they make mistakes and they do the wrong things from time to time. But at the same time, and the comic book gets into this, that the parents do it because they think that they're doing the best thing for their children. And of course, it turns out to go horribly wrong. I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's a really good series and has, kind of languished for a couple of, it feels like a long time. It feels like it, but I only got into it recently. Again, this is something that came out. The first issue was published back in 2003. I didn't get into it until everyone had already stopped caring about it. But people have liked the characters so much that they've been kept alive in other series, and you see them here and there pop up. And I like the news. They're on issue 5 right now. Issue 6 is coming out on the 7th of February. I'm looking forward to it. It's great to see them back doing their thing. You love all the characters. There's Nico, the witch with the staff of one. It's a magical staff that she has to summon by making herself bleed in one way or another. And it can only cast the same spell once. Though it seems to be that it can cast the same effect, you just have to know different words for the same effect, which is a different way to describe it, which is pretty interesting. Writers probably have a lot of fun with that one. There's Chase, who is probably one of my favorite characters. He's his dad was real abusive to him. He was a genius. His father was a genius. But Chase was basically the opposite. He was really kind of not very focused on academic things and was instead a physical prodigy. He was a big lacrosse player and, athlete in general. And just probably the type of people that used to bully his father. So his father turned that aggression against his son inappropriately, of course. But Chase also he's pretty much the only guy for a while, so it kind of becomes the father figure, quote unquote. Arsenic and Old Lace, Gertrude, and her. It's not a velociraptor, but it looks like a velociraptor. I can't remember the name that they give it. But it's a dinosaur with a purple back that she controls through her thoughts. And she is just the quintessential teenager. Just hates everything and everyone and is constantly questioning, well, why? I mean, that's dumb. I don't want to do that. There's Molly, who is the youngest. She's probably the rest of them are between like 16 and 17 when the story starts. Molly's probably 13 or 14. She's a mutant, and she's super strong and able to do amazing feats of, strength and whatnot. But once she's done with them, because she's young, she's incredibly tired. So she'll do these amazing things and then she'll fall asleep. Like just out of nowhere, which is, again, metaphor for childhood, growing up. Just genius stuff. And then there's Veronica, who is an alien. And she's composed. I don't know. They don't really get into her biology in detail. She lights up like a rainbow, like her hair glows and her body shimmers, and she can use light from her body to form like energy beams and, flashbangs and stuff. Not really entirely sure if she's solid or if she's made of light. They haven't really gotten that far detailed into it. Later they introduce other characters. Some of them come and go. Victor Mancha is probably the biggest one of them. A creation of Ultron, who was originally created to mature. He was created as a teenager of cybernetic and organic parts. He was supposed to mature and then become a superhero and then kill all the Avengers. And that programming was supposedly circumvented, but he's a cyborg, so we never really know what entirely is lying deep within the bowels of their programming. I mean, Vision's gone bad once or twice, so, what are you going to do? Runaways is something I'm a big fan of, and if you happen to check it out, you start from the beginning. Don't try to jump in somewhere randomly. I would suggest going all the way back to the initial issues. I have Marvel Unlimited, the Marvel service where you can read comics digitally. It's all on there. However else you get a hold of it, I got nothing to do with that. But I would recommend, again, starting from the beginning. So we're running a little longer than I expected. I just keep talking and talking and talking. There's movies I could go on about. There's whole mess of shit that I could go on about. But, we'll keep it to 3. We'll try to focus. We'll try to focus this into 3 topics. So we talked about podcasts, and I've talked about comic books. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is TV. So in the future, I'll pick, 3 topics and ramble on about those for several hours, or however long this happens to be. You got to establish ground rules, or I could be talking for 12 hours and, use up my material for later episodes and whatnot. I talked earlier about my last episode, which I got some decent feedback on. Thanks, guys. I did mention the Arrowverse, which is something that I am a huge fan of. Like, they do what the MCU does with a whole connected universe, even like doing what they do with like Avengers movies, which is crossovers, having people from multiple projects come and do one whole thing. Most recently, they did the Earth X crossover. DC is big into the DC Comics universe is big into parallel universes. That's one of their biggest tools to explain things. Marvel uses that a little bit, though Marvel tends to retcon more than DC does. Where Marvel will just rewrite the history and pretend that something didn't happen or it happened because of this reason. DC will say that a certain thing happens or occurs because it happened in an alternate universe that's very similar to ours, but there are these very subtle changes. And the Arrowverse has embraced that strategy, which I really like. In the main universe, what they call Earth 1 and what we will call Earth 1 for sake of argument, there's the Arrow and his whole band of vigilantes. There is Barry Allen, the Flash, and all of the originators from the DC's Legends of Tomorrow, the time-traveling superheroes, which I'll get to. And then there is, I don't know what Earth they're from exactly. I don't know if they've established that, if I just haven't been paying close enough attention, but Supergirl is not from the same universe. They live in different universes. And I think they originally established that because they didn't air on the same network. And now they're kind of stuck with that motif. Which isn't bad because it gives you all sorts of options to play with. Where in the first season of Supergirl, they had the Flash Supergirl crossover where he ended up in their universe, and they actually had, which was pretty cool, an episode of the Flash where he disappears and reappears, and he's like, "How long have I been gone?" And they're like, "Dude, you've been gone minutes. What are you talking about?" And then in the Supergirl episode, you find out why he was worried about that, because he was actually gone for a considerable amount of time in her universe. Good stuff. So yeah, alternate universes. They play with that. Most recently, they did an Earth X thing where they all were getting infested by people from another universe where the Nazis actually won. And some of the superheroes became, evil in this new universe. And yeah, just playing with it. Whereas the DC movies seem to be rigidly held to some sort of, I don't know. They seem to have some sort of darkness, I guess, is the only way to describe it, hanging over them. Some need to be gritty in order to differentiate themselves from the MCU, I suppose. Which are kind of bright and fantastical movies. But, again, I don't think that's necessary. I think what the DC Universe needs to embrace about itself is its Marvel heroes are unbelievable. but they have very human flaws. And that's what makes them interesting. Like, Captain America and throwing that shield in ways that makes absolutely no sense. Spider-Man marks on it. That shield does not, obey the laws of physics. Really, the truth about Steve Rogers, the reason we all like him is, he's just a nerd. He's just a tiny little dude that was picked on his whole life, is now getting some respect, and he just wants everyone else to be treated the same way. Because he knows what it's like. Peter Parker, he's a total nerd, pipsqueak, lost his parents. He feels alone in the world. And then suddenly he gains amazing powers. And he's suddenly able to step outside of himself and become, if not the best version of him, the most useful version. And that's something that the DC superheroes, maybe with the exception of Batman, don't really have. None of them really have any major flaws. I guess if they have flaws, it's that they're too perfect, But at the same time, they can do things that the Marvel superheroes couldn't do. Like, if Zeus came down from Mount Olympus, Spider-Man would be fucked. There's not a lot that he could do about that. But Superman, on the other hand, probably can handle Zeus toe-to-toe. Green Lantern might have a chance. The Flash, definitely. I don't know what the powers that God has, but I don't remember them being able to travel faster than the speed of light. They seem to be pretty much grounded to this earth. So, tangent. Getting off on tangents. The Arrow, all of this I'm talking about has nothing to do with the thing that I like. That's the funny thing. Let's get back to that. The Arrowverse. We talked about briefly, has one of the best versions of Superman that has been on screen, small or large, or otherwise, in the last few years. And actually, I've got to give, I'm not directly quoting him, but something that Movie Bob, which is a YouTube personality that I listen to, he does some really good movie reviews, and he does some general stuff like this, where he just talks about nerd ephemera and just, the general blockbuster movie scene that we find ourselves in and whatnot. So basically, the thing that makes Supergirl great is that they did basically a Superman show and just made her a woman. That's the only thing that they changed. Everything else is the same. She fights pretty much the same villains, and everyone relies on her exactly as they would Superman. Nobody's ever questioning, oh, you can't handle this on your own, Supergirl, because you're just a girl. None of that. There's never any of that conversation. In fact, she's usually the one saying, let me handle this. There's no way you could fucking handle this on your own. And, shit like that, I really respect. I think that's important, especially in the climate that they find ourselves in, and where feminism finds itself in this particular place and time. I think Supergirl, at least alone in the Arrowverse, is actually a pretty important show, even just despite, even if you're just looking for nerd stuff. But even beyond that, I think it's got some important things to say about, a woman's place in the world. And I appreciate that, because I ain't threatened by no strong woman. I can dig it. I got no problem with that. In fact, I'll just say this for my own damn self, since I'm just talking about random bullshit now. I would have absolutely no problem with being the kept man, the house husband, staying home, taking care of the kids while the wife goes to work. I would fucking do that. You do the birthing of the baby. I will do everything else from this point on if I never have to work again. And I think that's probably something that, I mean, it's a different way that the men see it, than a woman does. Less of a duty, more of a privilege, I suppose. But at the same time, I will make that sacrifice for you, baby. If your job is your identity, then absolutely, I will stay at home and fucking wipe poopy diapers and do all of that bullshit if it means that I don't have to go to work. So I guess all I'm looking for is a woman to take care of me. That's all I'm looking for. But yeah, the Arrowverse. I haven't even. I keep going off on these random tangents. I guess that's my thing. But yeah, what I like about it. Okay, so I talked about Supergirl pretty in depth, so that establishes why I like her. And so I talked about the alternate universes, and I talked about the Flash in the last episode, so I'll just touch on that, saying what I said last time and this time still applies. It's a great show, and the whole cast, including Grant Gustin, who is not blonde, do a great job. They sell the completely ridiculous in a really fun and engaging way. And there's just enough, heart in there for somebody who's not necessarily looking for an entirely special effects driven, rocket ride to the sun. They get to the heart of matters pretty well. I also touched on Arrow in my last episode, and I will say again, the melodrama, which turns off a lot of people. I fucking love it. I can't. It takes me back to my Buffy the Vampire Slayer days. Like, it's so over the top, and yet at the same time, just utterly enjoyable. So I don't have a problem with any of it. It's probably the most violent of the 4 Arrowverse shows. So if that's something that you're into, because it's not people with superpowers doing superpower things for the most part. It's mostly just people beating the crap out of other people and dudes shooting arrows into people. So, they don't have the rights to Batman. Apparently, that whole thing's complicated, but this is as close as they can get to Batman without. And also, they can take it a step further than Batman, because Oliver Queen in this universe doesn't have the same moral quandaries that Bruce Wayne did. He actually has to learn them, and eventually comes to regret them, which I think is probably a little more interesting than the straight up Bruce Wayne murders bad and I will never kill anybody riff. And then there is DC's Legends of Tomorrow. Yeah, it's a fucking interesting show. It's got time travel, which normally, if you've ever had a conversation about me, you know how I feel about time travel in movies and TV shows. There's never seems to be any consistent rules, and you can kind of do whatever you want with them. And are they Back to the Future rules where if you change things change in the future, or are they 12 Monkey rules where what we do was predestined to happen and we can't change anything? And they kind of throw all of that shit to the wayside. Just, make it a fun rocket ride through time. And, The rules of time travel don't really matter, and do they need to make sense? No, they don't. And what separates this from some of the things that I've seen, like that take that stance, like I don't know, Looper or something, is that the ride is what matters, and you actually grow to care about these characters and have fun with them on the journeys that they take through quote unquote time. And it doesn't really matter what the rules of time are. What matters is the characters and what they do and how much fun they have with each other and that sort of thing. And there are characters that were pre-established from other shows, mostly Arrow, some of them Flash. So that's, it's neat, I think. And I enjoy it. It's not, again, it's not their best show, and none of these shows would I recommend to anybody who doesn't care about this type of thing. But absolutely, if you are into nerdy stuff, watch this shit. It's so great. And again, it's like, I equate it to Buffy in my own. I don't know that it's necessarily as well written. We can argue about how well written Buffy the Vampire Slayer was later. I do think it has the same sense of wonder and fun that show had, as well as appreciating the points where drama can be effective, and also at the same time taking a universe, starting from scratch and building upon that. Like, so that if you come into the show today, you can still see shit that's really cool and exciting, but if you have followed the show from the beginning, you've got more to appreciate. Which I think was something that Buffy the Vampire Slayer was really good, and something that Arrowverse is probably better at. I mean, just continuity in general, they're very conscious of that. I really appreciate it. As a nerd comic book fan, it's always to be appreciated. Consistency in your narrative, it's always to be appreciated. And also when you make huge changes, because that's important in a comic book continuity as well, is taking something that's been established for, however long, years, sometimes decades, and flipping it on its head. How you handle that, how do you present that, that's important, and I think Arrowverse does shit like that pretty well. So I think that's where we'll kind of start to taper off. I don't even know how long I've been recording at this point. Okay, well that's a sizable chunk of time. I hope you've made it this far, and if you have, I really appreciate that, because I don't do these things just to hear myself talk. Though, again, as I said in the first episode, I do enjoy listening to myself talk. There was something I was going to try, but I'll save it for next week. It's a surprise. If you stick around, you'll and follow me on my next episode, then you'll see what it is that I'm talking about. Because I didn't expect to run this long. We'll move on from here. I will do a couple more like this, where I'll probably pick a couple of topics of things that I like and discuss them in length. If you have things that you like, feel free to share them with me in the comments, or send them to me otherwise if you know those means of communication. Matthew Amundsen's my name. You can find me on Facebook. Message away. I will always respond. I don't have a Twitter. I probably won't ever have one. So yeah, that's where we'll end it. Thanks for coming back. If you came back, thanks for coming by the first time. If you're time, and by the first time, I will try to keep it interesting. It won't always be about movies and comic books. Like I mean, if you listen to the first episode, I'm always going to talk about what's on my mind, whatever that happens to be. Today, I almost didn't have a topic, and then I was listening to Harmontown, and it was like, all these are people connected by things that they like, and I'm like, yeah, I that's cool. I can dig that. So let me talk about things that I like, and see where that goes, if that goes anywhere. The whole thing's an experiment. Next time, again, stick around if you do. Next time will probably be a little more experimental than even this one. And I don't know how that's going to go. We'll see what response we get. Yeah, thanks for coming out. As always, take care of each other. And I love you guys. I'll see you next time.